From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
It's the only place we'll be all year where it's perfectly acceptable to consume grilled cheese and milkshakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We're thrilled to be back in Madison, Wisconsin for the World Dairy Expo this weekend, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. The devastation from Hurricane Helene and the havoc it had on ag. Aggressive growth with an eye on technology as a fuel to pump out efficiency.
There were some times that I questioned what he was doing and wondering if he was moving a little fast, but that's been Perry's nature, is to keep things moving rather quickly, and it's worked out really well.
At not even 35 years old, this Wisconsin dairy farmer is making waves and now receiving a recognition. Spunky and fearless, both in and out of the ring with a dire diagnosis not even a year ago.
It's really rare.
How rare?
Like 2% of the world has it.
It's such a hard thing to hear that your daughter could die.
In need of a heart transplant at just 12 years old, how the Love for Lexi movement is capturing hearts while also trying to save hers. Now for the news. It's been a week since Hurricane Helene came ashore, and we are just getting a look at the scope of the damage to farms and ranches in the Southeast. USDA estimates that insurance payouts for losses across the Southeast could reach $7 billion. In Georgia, cotton crops ready for harvest were flattened, and the state's Cotton Commission saying affected producers are reporting yield losses ranging from 35% to a total loss. But poultry, timber, and pecan crops also saw heavy damages in the states. Moses Pecans in Uvalde, Georgia, sharing these devastating scenes, saying they have 80% total tree loss across all their orchards. About 20% of the younger trees are left. And overall, the University of Georgia is estimating larger pecan trees suffered about a 70% loss, and younger trees saw about a 40% loss. Georgia peanut farmers worked ahead of the storm to harvest what they could, but in one county, there was major damage to a peanut elevator and storage bin. And in North Carolina, farmers are having to go to incredible lengths to get their cows milked. The North Carolina Farm Bureau sharing these pictures and videos from one farmer helping to move a fellow producer's entire milking herd to a different farm and working to get a milking facility up and running that had sat idle for 9 years. He says he knows several farmers who have lost all their winter's feed, and some lost cattle as well. And in eastern Tennessee, it's much of the same story, with pictures shared of flooding and fields underwater. The news comes as harvest continues to pick up pace. The latest crop progress report from USDA reporting 21% of the corn crop has met with the combine, 3 points ahead of average. For soybeans, 26% is harvested. That's 8 points ahead of average. And cotton harvest, well, it's now 20% complete, 4 points ahead of the normal pace. And winter wheat planting now well underway with 39% of the crop in the ground, 1 point ahead of average. Meanwhile, farmers continue to deal with old crop. USDA releasing its quarterly grain stocks report earlier this week. The agency reporting old crop corn stocks as of September 1st totaled 1.76 billion bushels. That's up 29% from last year. 780 million bushels of that are stored on farms, also up 29% from a year ago. Off-farm stocks totaled 980 million bushels, up 30%. And for old crop soybeans, it's a similar story. 342 million bushels is being stored, up 29% from September 1st of last year, with 111 million bushels on farms, up 54%. Off-farm stocks coming in at 231 million bushels, up 20%. And wheat, it sets at just under 2 billion bushels, up 12%. On-farm is at 664 million bushels, up 11%. Off-farm, that's up 13% at 1.32 billion. Analysts called the corn stock number friendly.
What it probably suggests is we definitely fed a lot. The disappearance in the fourth quarter was strong. We needed it to be strong to get a good number today, and we got it. The other wild card was maybe would they find some extra bushels from last year's crop? That kind of surprised us. At this point, we did not get it. So I guess you could argue the government had a pretty good handle on the ending stock numbers at the moment.
Well, we also received the small grains summary with all wheat production totaling 1.97 billion bushels, up 9% from last year, with an average yield of 51.2 bushels per acre. That's up 2.5 bushels from last year. We will have more on these numbers coming up in our roundtable discussion. And 3 days of walking the picket lines, U.S. longshoremen are back on the job this weekend at East and Gulf Coast ports. That's after reaching a tentative deal. Reuters reports the agreement includes a wage hike of about 62% Over 6 years, that would raise the average pay to about $63 per hour, up from $39 per hour. The deal ends the biggest work stoppage in nearly half a century at the ports. The U.S. Dairy Export Council and the National Milk Producers Federation welcoming the news, saying it was severely affected by the disruptions as $1.7 billion in dairy exports flow through the East and Gulf Coast ports each year. The U.S. Meat Export Federation also saying the end of the strike for now is a tremendous relief, as about $100 million worth of beef and pork products are exported every week through those ports. Meanwhile, workers at a Cargill factory in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, are also on strike. The strike involving Teamsters Local 238 starting Tuesday night after it rejected the company's latest offer. Its contract with the company expired on Monday night. It says it has been in discussions over wages and working conditions impacting about 100 workers.
That's it for the news. Well, it is just heartbreaking to see the effects of the hurricane in the southeast, and we'll have a check of your weather coming up next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer.
Ben's bins, please hold.
Yeah, Ben's has been busy all day.
Seems like no one can keep up with this new Z series. What did you all put in these seeds?
Science.
U.S. Farm Report weather is brought to you by H&S Manufacturing. The Big Dog forage boxes feature stainless steel sides, front panel, and rear door and come in 26 and 30-foot models to fit your needs. Learn more at the H&S website.
Well, North Carolina farmers would probably like to write off 2024. First, it was devastating drought all summer that cut into crop yields and feed. Now it's Hurricane Helene. And meteorologist Jack Van Meter joining us now with a look at weather as we're watching yet another tropical hurricane.
Bit of a pattern starting to emerge in the United States, and that pattern is going to be dry weather, unfortunately. As I put this in motion, we can see some rain will be accumulating down south, especially in Florida. Shocker there. Obviously, they're going to be getting those pop-up showers in the afternoon every single day. Seeing some Gulf moisture out there in Texas, but also seeing a lot of moisture starting to be deposited actually between the Great Lakes region and the eastern part of the country. And that's going to be because the system that's going to be moving through, pretty much riding the border of U.S. and Canada, and really just starting to dump rain out there as well. Current drought monitor that just got issued last week, as we can see a lot of areas going to be relieved from their drought conditions. And again, unfortunately, it was relieved because of Hurricane Helene and how much water it actually dumped. West Virginia and parts of Ohio still in that exceptional and extreme levels of drought, which again, a very unfortunate situation. But going out west, we can see again, Red River region of Texas and Oklahoma still dry, and especially southwest Texas. My goodness, they're fairly dry as well. Moving out west, again, we can see that levels of extreme and severe drought starting to expand in eastern Wyoming too, and parts of the western Dakotas too. So again, something to keep a very, very close eye on. And as a result of all the high pressure that will be setting up in the country, we're looking at extremely dry conditions, especially for parts of the Midwest and Great Lakes region. Again, the whole reason why it's going to be that jet stream that's going to be moving through. Today, as we can see, the jet stream kind of almost in between systems. We have a ridge starting to set up right around the Four Corners region, again, due to high pressure. We have that low pressure system moving through the Great Lakes and Midwest region. That's going to be that system, again, like I said, it is going to be riding the U.S.-Canada border. As I put this in motion, dips down just a little bit, going to give everybody, again, up in the northern Great Lakes region. We're talking Michigan, Pennsylvania, parts of Maine as well. Some cooler temperatures, but more importantly, nice shot at moisture, and pretty much looking like going to be the only shot of moisture in quite some time, because we are watching that ridging really start to ramp up in the western part of the country. Take a look at this. We can see those heights shoot well up into Canada, and a lot of this country is going to be above average going into throughout the week, actually into parts of next week as well. Something to definitely keep an eye on.
Thanks, Jack. Well, dairy prices have improved. That is the good news. And feed prices are also better. But what's the biggest wild card for dairy producers to close out 2024? And did USDA's big grain stocks report to start the week give any signals for where grain prices could be heading? Dan Bossy, Katie Burgess, and Robin Schmall join us from the World Dairy Expo right after the break.
U.S. Farm Report on the road from World Dairy Expo 2024 is brought to you by TechMix, keeping animals drinking, eating, and producing. Learn more at techmixglobal.com.
Well, welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend from World Dairy Expo here in the Tyne Morgan. We've already covered a lot in news, but a lot more to talk about. And in order to do that, we have Robin Schmall, Katie Burgess, as well as Dan Bossy to look at the milk markets and grain markets as we move forward. Robin, no doubt milk prices are much better than they were last year at this time, much better than the $15 per hundredweight we saw in January. But as you look at milk prices today, do you think the highs are in?
Yes, I think the highs are in. Unfortunately, we have the buyers of cheese, primarily or butter. Basically, they feel comfortable. They feel comfortable with supplies right now. Butter supply in the August inventory is 11% higher than last year. We are 6% lower in cheese inventory, but the traders, or the buyers, I should say, are comfortable. So you've seen that just recently, how they've stepped back from that market because they just don't have to be aggressive.
You know, we saw CME barrels see the largest single day drop since November of 2020 earlier this week. Katie, is that just what Robin said? Is that this thought that we just have ample supplies right now?
Yes, the market, it was up at record highs 2 weeks ago. So luckily we fell from a very high price level and has crashed lower over the past 2 weeks. But I think the market could be to a point of stabilization now, that, to Robin's point, people are comfortable with supplies, but it's not like we have surplus supplies that they're going to have to push it lower. So I think we've seen the worst of the fall in the cheese market. Now it probably skates into year end.
So Katie said it's not like we have just a surplus of supplies here, Dan. And the reality is we're looking at a shortage of heifers right now. So what is your supply scenario that you think is going to play out?
Yeah, we're still relatively bullish. I think the highs are in. I agree with Robin, but I also don't see a big break below $19 or $20. Maybe we go down to those levels, but as we transition into next year, there's no expansion in the EU. Oceania isn't having the supply. As long as the consumer stays engaged, I am relatively bullish dairy and milk as we go into the middle of next year. If you remember last year, we talked about species. It was a year of species this year. And so I still believe that carries through into 2025.
All right, Robin, do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree. I don't think with the beef on dairy phenomenon we have, it was very important to the dairy producers to generate income. We're seeing that tight heifer supply. That's not going to change anytime soon. So having that, we're keeping some of the older cows into the herds, but farmers are doing well with those older cows. But it is going to be an issue that we won't be seeing the expansions and maybe quite the improvement in genetics as we move forward.
Katie, let's real quick, we'll get into the port situation and the impact on exports coming up. But Katie, as you look at the export picture today, better than where we were last year, but do you think we will see exports grow?
We're up against a tight comparison. So this year, cheese exports, March, April, May, we set new record highs. So to me, I don't know that in 2025 we're going to be able to best the records that we set this year. That being said, over the summer, exports have come down a little, but they're still at good levels. And when we look at the EU, as Dan alluded to, we're not seeing much growth there. And so because of that, I think the US is still competitive. We're hearing about some exports getting booked for 2025. So I think it'll be good. I just don't know if it'll be new records next year.
All right, we'll get into the port strike here in a minute, but even if export demand holds where it is today, Dan, you think milk prices can hold into 2025?
Yeah, I do. We're losing, by our calculation, about $4.2 million a day on right now the port strike. But here's the other side of it. The longer this goes on, there's a bullish aspect of it down the road as we don't have imports coming in and getting unloaded. And so if you were to tell me this strike lasts for 4 weeks, I'm going to tell you it's actually bullish, not bearish. But that's a different way of thinking about it, just relative to the amount of product that would not be offloaded into the United States.
What if it lasts longer than 4 weeks?
It's even more bullish because ultimately the import side of things gets to be more interesting. And it's not only for dairy, it's across the board. I need beef coming in for hamburger. I need a lot of these things. And so as I start doing the calculations, the port strike, if it lasts longer, is actually going to be somewhat positive for U.S. agriculture. Seems strange, but that's the way we see it.
All right, well, we're just getting started. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more U.S. Farm Report.
U.S. Farm Report on the road from World Dairy Expo 2024 is brought to you by TechMix, keeping animals drinking, eating, and producing. Learn more at techmixglobal.com.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report here from World Dairy Expo. All right, Robin, this federal order reform proposal that we have, what impact will it have, if any?
Well, according to the ideas now, when you look at the calculations, in some federal orders, we will see probably a little bit lower milk pricing situation, making a change in the make allowance, going back to the higher of. Those will kind of offset each other to some degree. Yeah. Maybe eliminating the barrels in the AMS survey, maybe dealing something with the Class 1 pricing, but calculating it is going to have a little bit of a negative impact in general. Some federal orders a little bit worse than others.
Let's look at the processing capacity, Katie, because we are set to add quite a bit of processing capacity in the dairy space over the next 12 months. Do you think that will have any impact on the market?
I think so. It's a pretty exciting time in dairy right now that we're seeing a lot of investment. We've got a big new cheese plant in Kansas opening later this month. We'll have one in Texas. Next year, we're seeing investments in New York, across the Midwest, in the Pacific Northwest. But I think the question then is, where does the milk come from to fill those plants? U.S. milk production has been down. As my counterparts have talked about, there are not very many heifers. So I think we'll see some growth in those regions that people were planning to grow to supply milk to those plants. But it could also mean we pull milk out of butter and powder plants. So make more cheese in the new plants, but maybe make a little bit less milk powder.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, Dan. Let's talk feed prices.
Yep.
We had the grain stocks report come out earlier this week. What was the biggest surprise or shock to you?
Well, the biggest surprise is that we used about 100 million bushels more of corn in the fourth quarter, crop year fourth quarter, which would be from June till August than the year before. And so we used about 849 million bushels. We had lower corn stocks at 1.7 billion. And with that, along with a little macro tailwind, we've seen the corn market up about 40 cents from the harvest lows. So, grain farmers are feeling a little better about life. Whether or not it continues, I think depends a lot on what yields will be reflected in the October crop report.
Grain market was bullish after that, even though we're hearing some phenomenal corn yields out there. Soybean prices, we haven't seen as much action within the soybean market. It's been a little bit lower. What has been pressure? I mean, last week we were really focused on South America. We were focused on yields. What is the soybean market paying attention to this week?
Soybeans are paying attention to the macros and also the money flows as we get closer to a flat position. Where I really worry is if Brazil turns to a more favorable or normal weather pattern and we start to see their crop get in the ground. Right now, we're only about 3% planted in Brazil. If seeds start sitting in the ground and Mother Nature starts providing some rain, Brazil could do 170 million metric ton soybean crop. And then we have bean prices back under $9, maybe next February, March.
All right. Well, we need to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more U.S. Farm Report in just a moment.
Hey, folks, welcome back to Tractor Tales. This week, we're going to head to the land of Lincoln, Illinois, to check out a John Deere 4620 that was bought brand new.
Been on the farm since it was new. Was originally purchased with a 7/16 on-land moldboard plow. Has 4,700 original hours on it. My grandfather bought it, $10,500. We were in the process of expanding ground at that point in time, so it became our large workhorse back in the day. It was in the field last fall. It still goes if it needs to go. My dad and my grandpa sit in the seat, and now I'm sitting in the seat. I grew up behind the seat until I was about 10, and that's when they finally started letting me run on my own. So the first 10 years of my life on the farm are basically in the cab of this tractor. It's all original. I mean, that's the second set of tires that's ever been on it since 1971. Only been repainted and that's it. Otherwise, I mean, it's just been light maintenance. The motor's never been apart. It's still all original. It is our baby of the fleet as far as the new generation tractors is concerned. It's a very big pride thing. I've enjoyed this tractor and will forever. The family heritage, it reminds me of my youth, my grandparents and my dad, and the efforts put forth to have what we have today.
Thanks, Greg. Well, there's no doubt Wisconsin dairies are disappearing, but one young dairy farmer didn't see failure as an option. Instead, he bought both his parents out, and with growth in mind, he never looked back. We introduce you to Perry Baton, a young Wisconsin dairy farmer who's bucking the trend in order to survive as a dairy here. That story is next.
You're watching U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
Well, the number of dairies here in Wisconsin has dwindled over the past 2 decades. In 2005, the state had 15,000 licensed dairies. In 2022, that number was down to just over 6,300. But don't tell Perry Baton that. Failure was never an option. Instead, he chose to buckle up, knowing in order to survive, they also had to grow, get lean by becoming even more efficient, even if that meant spending more money to make it happen. And he's the 2024 Milk Business Young Producer Award winner. And this weekend, we show you how his dream is now his reality.
Yeah, a typical day, wake up, usually around 4:30.
Early mornings may be the norm on any dairy farm.
Depending on the day, we got herd check every Tuesday, hoof trimming every Wednesday. So those are, pretty early stuff.
And while this may look like a normal dairy farm, Perry Baton's attention to detail is the footing for this new Franken dairy farm and what makes it so unique.
I always like farming. I think it's a really good lifestyle, stressful and everything, but I changed a lot. I used to like more of the tractors and working land, and then when we took this over, I had to focus on the cows and kind of become a cow guy.
Perry prides himself on being a cow guy, something he views as the biggest asset on the farm.
I always say that if you keep, good cow numbers, everything else on that side, it's a little more leverage. Tractors don't make you money every day, so cows do.
Perry's dairy is impressive when you walk into the facilities today, but 12 years ago, this was all a dream.
Well, my dad bought it in 1979, so he was first generation here. It wasn't operating at the time. And then him and my mom started milking cows, I think in 80. They were at like 30, and then in 89, they doubled, went to 70. 2012 is when they were getting kind of tired of it, so I bought in, sold my house, and decided it was a good time to do it.
That brought a new chapter for Perry and a fresh start, which then brought a mountain of change.
2016, we bought a neighbor out and we're milking 2 stanchion barns. And then 2017, we built the first freestyle barn in a little retrofitted parlor. And then 2 years ago, we put in a parallel parlor in our old heifer barn and went up to about 700 cows.
Perry's growth has been aggressive, and that comes as no surprise to anyone who knows him.
There were some times that I questioned what he was doing and wondering if he was moving a little fast, but that's been Perry's nature, is to keep things moving rather quickly, and it's worked out really well for him to what you see here today.
Brad Zellner is Perry's nutritionist and has worked with him from almost day one.
I think he might have been the first guy I called to come in here and help me. My wife has been a big part. I don't know how she put up with a lot of that stress.
Perry's wife, Cassandra Baton, says the early days were challenging.
There's a lot of decisions and stuff, ideas that I wasn't quite on board with, but in the long run, like a lot of them, you can see that it's been for the better.
And what makes this operation even more impressive is the fact that the Batons had to build all of this pretty much on their own.
He had some help from family, but not as much as what some of the other operations have had. And he wasn't starting with anything new or immaculate.
Learning as he went, Perry's growth hasn't just come in the number of cows, but also how he dives into technology.
We just installed a herd monitoring cow manager system, ear tag system. I'm very, very happy with it. And we cut our shots well below half of what we do now for breeding. It's kind of like an extra person in the herd.
It was an investment that Perry made at the beginning of this year.
I figured we're getting to a point where it's like, boy, it'd be nice to have a herdsman, but now we can. I really don't need one at this point until if we get bigger.
It's an endless effort to become more efficient, and even more changes could be on the way.
We're looking at putting a sand separation in. We're definitely planning to grow the herd a little bit. I'm gonna put in a bigger feed pad. It seems like that's never big enough for amount of feed. We're always running out of that. And
technology has become a strong foundation, but Perry says his other key to success, well, it's his 9 employees on the farm.
A lot of training, but We try to have little meetings at least once every other month.
And as Perry looks back, he says it's rewarding to see the change and growth in them as well.
I'd say I'm pretty proud. It's kind of cool when you can walk in and one's taking care of fresh cow, and it's like, makes you feel good that he's taking care of that just as good as you are sometimes, so.
At not even 35 years old, what Perry has built is nothing short of impressive, which makes him deserving of the 2024 Milk Business Young Producer Award winner.
The most rewarding is seeing all your stuff you did, you know, all your accomplishments, the change over time.
It means a lot. He's not one to be in the spotlight, and I think it's a great opportunity for younger producers to realize that, you know, it's not all about driving tractor.
Perry says these older barns are a sign of how much has changed. And now raising the next generation with their son Nathan and daughter Ivanka, they are his motivation to not stop here. Perry and his wife will be recognized during the 2024 Milk Business Conference. That's December 10th through the 11th in Las Vegas. And if you're a dairy producer and would like to attend, great news, there is still time to sign up. Just go to milkbusinessconference.com. I'll be there helping MC, but we'll also have a live taping of U.S. Farm Report. And for the first time ever, Clinton Griffiths and I will have a live taping of our new podcast, Unscripted. Well, when we come back, it's a glimpse of ag around the globe. That's next. Now for a glimpse of ag around the world. We told you earlier about the longshoremen's strike and the impact that's having on imports and exports. Now grain associations are looking for ways to help ease other trade bottlenecks. The group's announcing BNSF will resume grain shipments to Mexico, while other railroads have not yet followed suit. The National Grain Feed Association praised the move, but did warn that delays could persist until the backlog is fully resolved. U.S. rail companies had halted shipments due to congestion in Mexico, prompting calls for intervention from the Biden administration. Well, Mexico has a new president. Claudia Sheinbaum was sworn in this week, becoming the country's first female president. The 62-year-old scientist turned politician is taking over in a country with a number of immediate problems, including a sluggish economy, unfinished building programs, rising debt, and hurricane-hit areas. The U.S. Trade Representative's Office and the USDA report the administration has made significant strides in expanding market access and boosting agricultural exports. The agency's reporting the four-year average of U.S. ag exports is 28.5% higher compared to the previous 4 years. It says the administration has secured more than $26 billion in ag market access globally, adding the peak was reached in 2022 with a record of $196 billion in ag export values. Officials cited key initiatives, including the Regional Agricultural Promotion Program and the Assisting Specialty Crop Exports Initiative, along with trade relationships, improvements with India, Colombia, and gaining access for U.S. fresh potatoes to Mexico. Washington watchers say some of the increase, though, in export value may also be attributed to those higher prices that we've seen rather than only increased volumes through the administration, pointing out there's also a projected record trade deficit for fiscal year 2025. And the U.S. and China are scheduled to talk trade. China's state-run news agency says the commerce minister and his U.S. counterpart will hold a call soon on trade and economic ties. It's reported they will exchange views on bilateral economic and trade relations and key issues of mutual concern, including restrictions on electric vehicles. That's it for a look at ag around the world. Well, there is a shortage in the dairy industry. We'll tell you what that is with Chip's Corner coming up next. Here now with Chip Flory for Chip's Corner. Chip's been broadcasting all week here from World Dairy Expo. And Chip, one thing I immediately noticed in talking to producers, talking to different companies here, the mood is significantly better than last year.
Yeah, absolutely. What a difference a year makes. There's no doubt about that. A year ago, we were looking at $18 milk, $17 milk in some cases. This year, it's been as high as $24, and it's backed off a bit, but it's still at price levels that should be bringing around some expansion in the dairy herd. The problem is, according to Phil Plord at Ever Ag, is the cows just aren't there.
We don't really have the animals.
Yeah.
Beef on dairy breeding, in particular, has narrowed up the pool of available replacements, and they're expensive and fewer in number. And so I think there's a big question around, everything we've ever seen historically says more money makes more milk. but you kind of need the cows to get the job done.
Phil brings up a good point. We have a shortage of heifers on our hands.
Yeah, there's no question about it. So we're about 3, maybe 4 years into the big development of beef on dairy, and we're just starting to realize some of the unintended consequences of such fine-tuning in the breeding plans that all of a sudden we've got enough heifers to replace the cows that are being culled, but we don't have the heifers to expand production. So it's something that we're going to have to take a real close look at going forward.
Thanks, Chip. Yeah, only a couple years ago we started talking about beef on dairy, and now that is one of the main topics here at World Dairy Expo. All right, you can catch Chip 10 a.m. every weekday for AgriTalk AM and 2 p.m. Central in the afternoon for AgriTalk PM. All right, when we come back, it's a touching story about a 12-year-old girl who's waiting on a heart transplant. We caught up with her right here at World Dairy Expo as she is desperately waiting for that call. Happy and healthy. That's how you described Lexi Anderson just a year ago here at World Dairy Expo. An avid dairy show woman, horse lover, and sports fanatic, Lexi will quickly capture your heart. But as she entered the show ring this week here in Madison, it's her own heart that needs saving. Lexi Anderson looks like a typical 12-year-old kid, a 6th grader full of life and so much spunk. How long have you been coming to World Dairy Expo?
12 years.
So your whole life?
Yeah.
But Lexi's life took a dramatic turn nearly 10 months ago, 2 months after the 2023 World Dairy Expo.
So in December of 2023, she started feeling dizzy on the basketball court. And at first, we weren't really sure what was going on, whether it was dehydration or what it was.
But when Lexi blacked out on the court, they knew something wasn't right.
And they decided to bring me in to the doctor, and then we figured out that I had this heart problem.
Not just a minor problem, restrictive cardiomyopathy.
It's a hardening of the heart, the lining of the heart. So the walls of the heart are eventually going to harden and stop pumping.
It's really rare.
How rare?
Like 2% of the world has it.
A fast-paced disease that meant Lexi was in need of a heart transplant.
When we first got the news, it was extremely hard to get that news. To hear that your daughter, the average, sometimes kids only have 1.5 years after they're diagnosed with this. It's such a hard thing to hear that your daughter could die.
A heartbreaking diagnosis, but Tamala says they were sent to specialists at the Children's Hospital in Milwaukee, an amazing team of doctors that immediately planted seeds of hope.
We've got a great team. They don't even let us look at the negative. They told us we're going to find a heart. You don't need to worry about it. We're going to find it. We're gonna fix her.
Today, Lexi has doctor visits at least every 6 weeks.
I got banned from playing all sports to stop it growing.
That means all sports, no more basketball, running, or playing softball.
I really miss playing softball.
It's hard, so I kind of do have her wrapped up in a bubble.
Helpless in so many ways, Tamala did the only thing she could, and that was to protect her little girl, all while waiting on the call that could save her life.
To know that we could get a phone call at any time, honestly, I have my bags packed. They're in the car. So I've got her bags packed in the car. We're waiting and we're ready.
Are you scared at all? Are you nervous at all?
I'm a little nervous. I don't know when I'm gonna be able to get back, and I don't know if they're gonna hold me for the 3 months recovery, but hopefully they let me go home and just recover at my house.
At 12 years old, Lexi's courage is contagious, and her support, well, it's inspiring. She has an army of family and friends who are rooting her on with a group called Love for Lexi.
A couple of our friends at home decided to do a website. It's www.loveforlexi.com, where we have Caring Bridge connected. Some of it's to raise money, some of it's just to let people know how she's doing.
And that love was put on center stage this summer when Lexi's friends Hattie and Holly Hargrave gave the ultimate gift of generosity with a lamb for Lexi.
We went to a county fair and I was showing sheep and I didn't make sale and one of my friends did, and it raised over $27,000 and she gave it to me for the benefit.
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. Honestly, when the first buyer bought the lamb, I mean, I was in tears then. And then he's like, nope, I want to sell it again. And he gave it back and they sold it again. And I mean, it sold 4 times. 4 times.
$27,000 from 4 businesses who all came together to show Lexi love and support.
We live in a really, really great community.
Lexi, that's $27,000 that your friend raised for you. I mean, how loved do you feel?
I feel really, really loved.
Lexi looks happy and normal today, but as her heart works in overdrive, the reality is Lexi's body is tired and worn down.
Some days it takes her breath away just to walk across the parking lot. Some days she is jumping around saying, I'm ready to go.
But this week at World Dairy Expo, Lexi was determined to go in the ring, bringing home hardware and memories she won't forget, especially with her cousin winning junior champion of the junior show at World Dairy Expo.
I was super happy because it's like a victory for the farm, because we're all showing just to have fun, and she won. So we just cheered each other on and we started like supporting each other and stuff.
That's who Lexi is, a spirited kid who's always supporting those around her.
She's a great kid, honestly. She's got such a big heart that, you know, I mean, if she sees someone down or honestly, if she sees someone even getting bullied, she's more the protector. So she's a great kid.
Lexi's big heart is now what's needing saved, but it's a constant showing of love and support that's getting this family through.
Wearing my Love for Lexi bracelet right now. Lexi's next big test is Monday. She goes in for a stress heart catheter test where they'll measure the stress between her heart and her lungs and her organs. If it shows signs of elevated stress, she may have to be admitted in the hospital and stay until she receives that heart transplant. So our prayers are with Lexi and the entire family this coming week. Well, when we come back, cutting back without sacrificing valuable yield. Michelle Rowe joins us next.
Yield Builders on U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Syngenta, where better yield is the better deal. Find out how to unleash your yield potential at syngenta-us.com/better yield.
Well, margins for grain producers have been tight for the 2024 crop year and maybe even tighter for the next growing season, making every bushel count. Farm Journal's Michelle Rook joins us. Michelle, what are really growers doing to improve their margins for 2025?
With lower grain prices heading into the 2025 growing season, farmers are looking for ways to cut input costs, but they don't want to sacrifice yield. So instead of just cutting across the board, it's recommended producers take a more strategic approach and focus on their best agronomic return on their investment. Many farmers are looking at big ticket items like fertilizer in their agronomy plan to cut costs for 2025. However, Tim Gregerson, who farms in east central Nebraska and is a Pro Farmer Master Scout, says he's not making across-the-board cuts. Instead, he's using precision ag tools like variable rate applications to place fertilizer next to the seed to save on his fertility plan.
We are really working hard on our fertility. We're in a strip till program where we grid sample on 2.5 acre grids, and then we'll go in and use that information and some of the yield information and get a prescription for fall strip till.
Plus, he's trying to match nutrients to the varying pH in his soil.
And where we're putting on like anhydrous with a stabilizer and dry NPK, zinc, and sulfur, and trying to get our soils more in balance. Also, we're trying to get some of this phosphorus broke up, and so we're using product. It's a biological that's sprayed on in the fall.
With increasing corn diseases like crown rot and anthracnose rot, he's also looking at more starter applications of fungicide for prevention.
So we're starting to try some fungicides in furrow. We've had programs where we've used fungicide on post-emerge herbicide practices on corn, and also at VT tassel with an aerial application over the top of fungicide for plant health on the outside of the plant that we can see.
He says this provides more season-long protection to prevent disease, improve plant health, and protect yield. I'm Michelle Rook for U.S. Farm Report.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, that does it for our show from World Dairy Expo this weekend. Thanks to World Dairy Expo for hosting us and Techmix for sponsoring our marketing discussion. Next week, we will be back in the studio to work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.